Hello there. Welcome into a Monday edition of the show. So glad to have you, whether you're listening on your radio, streaming the show online, or you're listening on the free Extra Sports 1300 app sponsored by Diversus Health, mental health, and well-being for all. How's your mental health today when it comes to the well-being of your favorite football team? We'll discuss, along with the rest of our veritable cornucopia of sports topics I have for you today. And I always extend the invitation, but today feels like one of those days where even if you're someone that doesn't normally interact with the show, you might want to. 719-247-1313. You could call that number. You could text that number. You'll get through to me either way. Or you could send me something via X at Gingerly Tweets. What happened yesterday at Empower Field was less of a football game as it was a party. And I'm not necessarily referring to the scoreline, although that certainly does indicate that not much of a football game took place yesterday. I'm talking about a party that was hosted by the Broncos to celebrate the end of a playoff drought that lasted nearly a decade, but also the successful reboot of a franchise. That's what yesterday was. And it's like New Year's, right? What do you celebrate New Year's? Do you celebrate what's to come? No. Not as much as you're celebrating what you went through to get here. Right? You celebrate on New Year's to say, I made it. Whatever the previous year dealt you, whatever you had to get through, you got through it. And now you're on to another year full of possibility. And that's all the next year is. It's just full of possibility. But you don't know what's in store. You sure as heck know what you just went through. And that's what yesterday reminded me of. The Broncos franchise and their fan base. You endured a lot over the past 8 seasons. Vance Joseph, the head coach version, always a great week of practice, never a great Sunday. Vic Fangio, Nathaniel Hackett's nauseating Ted Lasso routine that didn't even last a full season, but it felt like it lasted 8 seasons in and of itself. And even more importantly, the cavalcade of quarterbacks, with the next one being worse than his predecessor. Paxton Lynch and his affinity for Xbox. The return of Brock Osweiler. Case Keenum. The hope of the first 4 games of Drew Lock's career, followed by the crushing of that hope pretty much for every one of the 19 games after. And of course, Russ. The constant mismatching of lesser quarterback talent with first-year head coaches who were in over their skis at that position. That's what you went through. And all that led to mediocrity or worse. While it is surprising that the Broncos are here as a playoff team now. Year one under Bo Nix, year two with Sean Payton. It's a surprise that they're here, no doubt about it. But why they're here is not that surprising. They finally got the two most important things right. Quarterback and head coach. Broncos have had good wide receivers before. They've had good defenses. Heck, the Broncos have lost with more talent than they won with this year. But yet it worked this year. Why? Sean Payton keeps bringing this up. Said it yesterday. Young and hungry is a dangerous combination. That's just something you say to fire up the rest of the team, to make them feel included. The combination that wins in this league is right coach, right quarterback. Simple as that. That will get you to where the Denver Broncos are. To reach the next level or the level after that, yeah, it takes more than just that, but you got to start there. And the Broncos for years couldn't get those two things right. You could argue they didn't have one of those things right at any point. Well, I lie. Gary Kubiak, they had Gary Kubiak the year after the Super Bowl. So they had coach right that 1 year. Other than that, they had Trevor Siemian. That wasn't right. So other than Gary Kubiak being a holdover from the Super Bowl team, the Broncos never had coach right and never had quarterback right, let alone the two of them fitting together. And that's also part of it. I'm not just talking about the talent that either the head coach or the quarterback possess. In fact, I'm talking more so about the fit between the two. I mean, think about this. So Gary Kubiak doesn't want Paxton Lynch. I don't know if you know that. Gary Kubiak was not a huge fan, but John Elway was. Okay, so that really didn't work out. Then you tried to save Paxton Lynch's career with the defensive-minded head coach in Vance Joseph. So that didn't work. Then you draft Drew Lock with the defensive head coach. And then you give him another defensive head coach in Vic Fangio, who you could tell from the outset never wanted Drew Lock to be his quarterback, never believed in the guy. And then nobody wanted Russell Wilson, at least not as their first choice. The Broncos hired Hackett to get Aaron Rodgers. That was the plan. So even with an offensive-minded head coach, which was a step in the right direction, they still didn't find the right quarterback for him. So they bring in Sean Payton, and Sean Payton's like, dude, no, I can't work with this guy. So the Broncos at no point since they won a Super Bowl with Gary Kubiak and Peyton Manning have they had those two positions right, let alone at the same time. You could say that they got Sean Payton right last year. But those two they both have to be capable, but they have to fit. And getting that combination can be a little bit expensive. And we know with what the Broncos were like prior to the arrivals of the Walton Penner Group, we know what their situation was. They were not willing to pay any price in order to get all of this right. Greg Penner was. So he said, I'm going to pay Sean Payton more than any NFL coach that isn't currently going for a three-peat. I'm going to allow my coach to take Bo Nix higher than anyone would have drafted him. And I'm going to eat the largest dead cap number in the history of dead cap numbers to get it all done. Think about how much the Broncos paid in one way or another to get Sean Payton and Bo Nix together. But now, do you care? Do you care how much they pay Sean Payton? Do you care how much they pay Russell Wilson? Do you care when they took Bo Nix? Bo Nix still isn't the 12th best player in this draft class, but that's fine. And I said it when they drafted him. If he becomes the right guy, it won't matter where they drafted him. But you look around the league and the teams that are successful, the teams that make the postseason, they get that right. And sometimes they pay a hefty price to get it done, but it is worth it. It is 100% worth it. And experiencing what you experienced yesterday, isn't it worth it? Now I'm bringing everything into it. Isn't all of this worth it? To see this team come out on the other side. And look, I know at times Broncos went nearly a decade. There are other fan bases that have had a worse go of it than the Denver Broncos. But the payoff of going through all of that to get yesterday, maybe I shouldn't say, is it worth it? But the payoff is pretty good given what you have dealt with over the past 8 years. I'll put it that way. And look, no matter what happens on Sunday, they'll get this part of the process checked off their list. Right? Because you've seen this with the Avalanche, you've seen this with the Nuggets. They didn't just show up in the playoffs and win a title. Okay, so not something I'm going to dwell on during the week. This is more off-season stuff, but I'll just bring it up. Like, the Broncos are a ways off from getting to ultimately where you want them to be. Like, I'm talking about the ultimate goal. They're a ways off. And you should know that if you're a Broncos fan. Because you've dealt with it before. But the Avalanche and the Nuggets, they had to keep going back to the playoffs and suffering disappointment and getting embarrassed and those difficult questions and those difficult roster decisions, like all that scar tissue that builds up in order to make a championship team. Like the Broncos aren't close to there yet. But they're going to get a little bit of it out of these playoffs one way or another. And in that way, they are ahead of the game. I do not expect the next step of the process to come together as quickly as this one did. But no matter, and look, maybe the best way to look at it on Sunday, keep that "we're just happy to be here" vibe. Like, that's fine. But my suggestion now is don't let anything that happens Sunday, short of a win, ruin what yesterday was and what today is. It is absolutely 100% found money, the Denver Broncos being in the postseason this year. And they'll be better for it. They'll be better for this experience no matter how Sunday goes. But they're here ahead of schedule. But why they're here is not surprising. Because you see this formula throughout the league. And the teams that don't have it, you notice that too. And the Broncos for years didn't. That's why they're here. And it's a credit to Sean Payton and Bo Nix and that team that they're here now. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts. Broncos back in the playoffs for the first time since 2015. I want your reaction. Emotional or logical? 719-247-1313. The Denver Broncos back in the postseason at long last. They snapped the second longest playoff drought in the NFL with Would resounding be the right word to use? Let's go with it. A resounding victory over the Kansas City Chiefs. But of course, the Kansas City Chiefs were not the Kansas City Chiefs that we know and love. Right? You love them. They were not. And in that way, the Denver Broncos were really in a no-win situation in terms of perception. Because if they win, like they did, there would be a lot of talk about who Kansas City did and did not play. And as far as who they did play, by my count, it was Harrison Butker. That's who they played. When we talk about the who, Harrison Butker. Everyone else, they did not play. I was today years old when I found out that the Chiefs have a player that wears Tony Gonzalez's 88, and he's a tight end. How is that allowed? No idea. Never heard of the guy. Go ahead, take my fan card. If you're a Chiefs fan listening, you didn't know who that guy was either. And if they lose, then it's the embarrassment of all embarrassments. Because you lost to Kansas City's JV team with everything on the line. So the Broncos were not in a great spot in that regard. But Sean Payton knew it, and Sean Payton, after the game, said that he really tried to make sure that his team was focused on themselves.
We really tried to focus on the process, but tune out like who might be or who might not be playing. We can't control that, and I meant what I said when I talked about Andy's team earning the right to do what they needed to do. Every one of us that's coaching a team in the postseason is trying to do what we feel like is going to help our team have the best chance of success.
And I to the Broncos' credit, they did play that way. They came out like they were playing the real Chiefs. Now, would they have been as successful against the real Chiefs? We can debate that till the cows come home. But they certainly came out playing like they were playing the varsity and not the JV, and it allowed them to put the Chiefs away early. Everyone could breathe a collective sigh of relief knowing that in no way, shape, or form would the Kansas City Chiefs be beating the Denver Broncos on this day, and the party that I mentioned earlier could begin. And I figured I would see some of these, and Tucker is in with one of these texts. No team should lay down and let the other team win. No one laid down for the Bengals. Shame on Andy Reid in the Chiefs. The Kansas City Chiefs did not, and would not have cared if Cincinnati was in the playoffs or not. This is complete buffoonery that anyone would seriously suggest that the Kansas City Chiefs did anything yesterday to prevent Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals getting in the playoffs. What they did yesterday had nothing to do with the Cincinnati Bengals. However, I'll say this as somebody who is a supporter of that franchise that has grown up in this state around people like you for 39 years on this planet. This better be the right call, Andy Reid. because my level of anger yesterday watching that game, and not anger because the Broncos were going to make the playoffs, but just the kind of what Tucker is talking about. While I disagree that the Chiefs laid down and the Chiefs were letting the Broncos win, they would have done that against any team in the league, because Andy Reid does not want to risk injury to any of his key players. Okay? So they did exactly what Sean Payton said. They did what was best for them. And I'm just here to say they better three-peat. Because there is a hierarchy of importance when it comes to games for me as a Chiefs fan. Number one is the Super Bowl, and number two is any game against the Denver Broncos. And if you're going to come out and get embarrassed and dunked on and clowned the way you were yesterday, you better make it worth it. You better be 100% right that keeping these players out and having 24 days before they step onto a football field for a competitive game again, you better make sure, Andy Reid, that you're right. Because I didn't love the idea of them benching everybody. The guys that have legitimate injuries, okay. But they didn't play, and you saw this, didn't play anybody except Harrison Butker. And here's where you insert the joke about how crazy yesterday was, the fact that Harrison Butker went wide left. He was the only one. And Carson Wentz looked like he never played quarterback in his life. He was so bad. And he was playing behind an offensive line that looked like they too had never played football before in their life. It was so bad. And so I understand why people would have the thought that Tucker does. But if you want someone to blame, okay, because I'll retroactively join you if the Kansas City Chiefs lose at any point during the rest of the playoffs, because I will inevitably blame the fact that Andy Reid thought it was okay for his team to rest for 24 days. But if you want someone to blame the NFL. And here's why you blame the NFL for yesterday. And this is not just Kansas City and Denver. Although they are the poster child for this because of how lopsided it was. There are too many games. This is what you're increasing the likelihood of when you extend the season for no other reason than greed. What did we get yesterday? And I know it, maybe if you're a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan, you're going to say, hey, we needed that. But legitimately look at it. What did we get yesterday that we wouldn't be okay with finishing up in 16 games instead of 17? Broncos would have been in. Bengals beat them. Whoops. Doesn't matter. Broncos still have more wins. What did we get yesterday that you said, oh, I'm so glad that we play 17 games now? Nothing. And I've been opposed to an extra game since they instituted it. It was going to always diminish the product. Now, obviously, there's a bit of sarcasm and tongue-in-cheek nature to what I'm saying about I'm going to jump in on Andy Reid if he if they lose at any point because he didn't play anybody last week or yesterday. But the Chiefs have something bigger to play for. And it should not be any of their concern what happens around them. If the Denver Broncos get in the playoffs, who cares? If the Bengals get in, who cares? Andy Reid did what he thought was best for the Kansas City Chiefs. And what he thought was best for the Kansas City Chiefs was to play nobody and to essentially what Bo Nix did yesterday was tear up the same level of defense that he faced in the preseason. Right? Second and third stringers, no exotic looks, no disguising, base defense. He played a preseason defense. And look, trust me, no one's more frustrated than Chiefs fans that was the product they put on the field yesterday. But this idea that the Chiefs should have played everybody for the benefit of who? So for the benefit of the Cincinnati Bengals? For the benefit of viewers? Their only stakeholders are their team and their fans. And that's who they made that decision for. And if they win another Super Bowl, it's going to be hard to argue. Right? I didn't like watching it any more than you did. But that's what Andy Reid felt like was best for his team. Rather than to put his best players who would be unmotivated and would potentially be risking injury. The Chiefs treated that like a preseason game. It's unfortunate from a competitive standpoint, from for the sake of drama. It's unfortunate, but they made just, if you have a problem with it, then that's fine. But they didn't do it to keep the Bengals out. They didn't do it for the benefit of the Denver Broncos. They did it because they think it'll benefit the Kansas City Chiefs. That's why they did it. (719) 247-1313. Continue to take your thoughts on that and the bigger picture of the Denver Broncos back in the playoffs. You're listening to Drive Time Sports. Broncos back in the postseason. And also what made yesterday the party more than a football game was, look, if you're a Broncos fan, can't you suspend belief enough to just appreciate the fact that it's the Chiefs? You know who wasn't playing, and you know that once the Broncos' first couple of drives, any concern that anybody had that the Broncos were going to lose went away. So for the rest of the game, you just say, hey, the Denver Broncos are beating the brakes off of the Kansas City Chiefs. That would be a true and factual statement. It would be great for a Broncos fan no matter what team they'd be doing it against, but it was against the Kansas City Chiefs, and perhaps made it all the better. But I get it. I think where you land on this is if you are somebody who does not have stake in that matchup, right? If you're not a Chiefs fan, if you're not a Broncos fan, you tuned in to see a game that had something on the line. One of the few games on Sunday that actually did, and you got nothing. You just got the Broncos moving up and down the field. You couldn't even give them a ton of credit for doing it because you knew what they were doing it against. Like, if you are impartial or you aren't a fan of one of those two teams, then I can understand where you tune on that game and you're like, seriously, this is the crap that they're putting out. But here's the other thing. Aaron called in during the break. If you are a Broncos fan or you are the Denver Broncos, you don't need to apologize for doing what you did yesterday. You don't have to apologize. Okay? The schedule came up the way it is. Now, there doesn't need to be a ton of chest beating going on about how great the Broncos are because they beat that Kansas City Chiefs team, but you don't have to apologize for beating the team that was in front of you to get into the postseason. And now, ultimately, what everyone's going to remember is how Sunday goes against Buffalo. That's what everybody's going to make. And the Broncos, if there are detractors from what the Broncos did, or those who want to minimize what the Broncos did based on who they were going up against, the Broncos have no one to blame but themselves because they had two bites at the apple to finish the job, two games that they had a chance to win, and they blew both of them, right? They had a chance to beat the Chargers and the Bengals, and they blew it. And so they needed yesterday. But if you're a Chiefs fan, you're saying, we don't care about that game at all. We got much bigger things to play for, and I would much rather sit through that nonsense for 3 hours if it gives me another Super Bowl at the end of this road because Mahomes is healthy, Kelsey's healthy, Chris Jones is healthy. And if you're the Broncos, you're saying, hey, we just want to make the playoffs. But if you're not a fan of one of the two teams, then I understand why you watch it and you're like, this is a sham and a farce. So I get where you're coming from, Tucker. I do. But to say that the Chiefs are laying down almost as I read it makes me feel like they were throwing the game. Like they were intentionally losing. And that's not the case. The Chiefs, with a week to prepare, with a group of second and third teamers, and a quarterback that's on his last legs in the NFL, that's what it looks like. right? That's how bad it is. Playing against a team that is playing as hard as they possibly can because they're playing for everything. That's the result that you get. And it just makes it look a little bit silly that anybody, including myself, was even drawing out a path for the Denver Broncos to not win on Sunday. Because the Chiefs look so bad, it almost makes you go, why did I even for a second entertain the idea that the Broncos weren't going to win and weren't going to win going away? The Chiefs backups with a week to prepare look that bad. But they weren't trying to lose that game. But call it load management. And I know that that's a dirty phrase to a lot of people. People don't like load management, but that's what the Chiefs were doing. They were load managing their players all at the same time, which is their right. You want to really be mad at somebody, be mad at the NFL for adding an extra game that we didn't need, or be mad at the rest of the AFC that they weren't good enough to keep Kansas City from locking up the first overall seed. All I heard all season long was that Kansas City's incredibly vulnerable and they're not nearly as good, and yet they lose one game until Sunday. Blame the rest of the AFC. Blame the teams on blame the Broncos. If the Broncos could fortify the left side of their line on a field goal, maybe the Chiefs got to play everybody. The product was horrendous. You're not going to get an argument from me when it comes to that. It was absolutely horrendous. But the Chiefs weren't doing that intentionally to lose. But they knew that losing was a distinct possibility. They had to. I mean, in practice, can you just imagine Andy Reid and Steve Spagnuolo? I thought Steve Spagnuolo was going to quit. I thought he was going to quit midway. You know, Sean McVay does this thing. The last game, he lets his offensive coordinator call the plays. He did that yesterday against the Seahawks. Like, I thought Spags was going to quit or just say, I'm out of here and head to DIA and let his linebackers coach take over. Like, I thought Spagnuolo's head was going to explode. But could you imagine Steve Spagnuolo and Andy Reid this week watching their new first teamers go at it in practice? They got to be going, oh my God, we're going to get killed. Now, they won't say that, but I got to imagine they were watching practice like, oh, we're going to get destroyed. Moral to the story, 16 games was enough. It was. Brett says the Broncos were in the same position as the Chiefs were 3 consecutive seasons. The first, they lost to Jacksonville in the opening round in a streak that should have been 3 Super Bowls in a row. The Broncos at least put a better product on the field than the Chiefs. They were at least competitive. This is an illustration that the Chiefs have no depth. Yeah, they don't really have depth. No. I mean, they have depth 1 through 22. Like, they have Chris Jones and George Karlaftis. They have Travis Kelce and Owen Gray. They have depth on the field. They don't got a lot of depth on the depth chart below the one line. But it is going to be there's going to be hell to pay if Kansas City comes out in 2 weeks and looks rusty. Which this year's version of the Kansas City Chiefs, they kind of always look rusty. So I don't know that we're going to be able to pinpoint it and say that's because they didn't play anybody against the Denver Broncos. I just, again, better be make it worth my while, Andy, because yesterday was, here's the thing. And if you're a fan of any team that has had a charmed life recently, right? If you're a New England fan, or if you were a Niner or Cowboys fan back in the 90s, or even the Broncos first stretches of their history, you know, the one thing that winning does makes you ill prepared for losing, especially losing like that. Because that's still your team that's out there, right? It's still your team. And oh, by the way, they're losing to a team that you grew up not having a great affinity for. It's tough. What I'm trying to say is you all have your celebration today as Broncos fans, but just realize that there's a victim in all of this. And it's not Joe Burrow, it's me. I'm the victim here. So just, think about what I went through. 719-24/7, 1313. Don't think about it. I will be fine. I'm all right. Black Monday is today. Isn't this a weird feeling in Broncos country? This is the Monday after a season ends. And the conversation today is not about should the Broncos fire their coach or should the Broncos find a different quarterback. My entire life speaking into this microphone, every year on this day, it's the same. Fire coach, fire quarterback. Every year. Last year, it was fire Russell Wilson. Year before, they already fired Nathaniel Hackett by the time we got to this point, but then it was like fire Russell Wilson. And then it was fire Vic Fangio, and it was fire Drew Lock, and it was fire. Today, nobody on the Broncos is being discussed as being fireable. And then you look around the league and you're saying, if you're a Broncos fan, look at these impoverished franchises that don't have a quarterback they like or don't have a coach that they like. Look how pathetic. Because that's how a lot of teams look today. No one more so than the New England Patriots. I mean, you peel back these layers of the Patriot dynasty. And we got this with the Bulls dynasty, right? Peel back Jordan. How good were the Bulls? Peel back the Bulls. How good was Phil Jackson? Pretty good. Take Phil Jackson off of the Bulls. Not great. But today, the New England Patriots fired Gerard Mayo. Not today, yesterday, which is important. They fired him yesterday. Less than an hour after they won. That's not a typo. They won. They fired Gerard Mayo. And Robert Kraft said that he was worried about losing Gerard Mayo, so he promoted him. You peel back one layer of the Patriot dynasty when Tom Brady went to Tampa. Results weren't great, right? Belichick without Brady. And then you take away Belichick, and you know who Robert Kraft looks like? He looks like Jerry Jones. You peel away the Brady and Belichick combination, and what you're left with are what so many other teams have. An owner that feels like he is a bigger part of his team's success than he really is. That's Robert Kraft. Right? Everyone wants to talk about, how much Belichick needed Brady. And yeah, he needed Brady. But how much does Robert Kraft need Belichick? Like, I get it. I get why Bill Belichick's no longer the head coach of the Patriots. It's because he could not continue as the general manager of the Patriots. Like, I get it. But your first act post Belichick, post Brady, is to make a decision to elevate someone to head coach because you're worried about him getting poached? And just to go back after the season's over and be like, whoopsie. That's the thing. We're always reminded of it, but sometimes we forget it. Owners in professional sports are not nearly as important to the success of their franchises as they would like you to believe. And it goes back to our theme of the day. Why are the Broncos where they are right now? They got a coach and a quarterback that they like and that fit together. Without that, you have owners who are meddling, owners that make bonehead decisions. The Patriots have gone in record time from being a dynasty to being a punchline. You don't do any outside interviews. You make Gerard Mayo your head coach for no other reason than we were afraid to lose him. It doesn't go well. You fire him after 1 year, expecting it to be different. Bill Belichick won 4 games with this roster. How many was Gerard Mayo supposed to win? Bulls dynasty. What's Jerry Reinsdorf outside of those Bulls teams? How respected is he as an owner? How good of an owner is he? These guys make one right decision their entire time owning a team, and they feel like they are responsible for every single win. How the mighty have fallen. More on Black Monday coming up because guess who on the Broncos staff is being rumored to interview with one of the teams seeking a head coach. But in the more immediate future, more on the Broncos win yesterday and the bigger picture of how they are into the playoffs for the first time in quite a long time. Welcome in, Drive Time Sports, on this Monday, the type of Monday that has not been seen in this part of the world for the better part of a decade. The Denver Broncos are not firing a coach. They're not looking for a new quarterback. They're getting ready to play in the first round of the postseason. And they did it in grand fashion, beating the Kansas State Wildcats, or Kansas City Chiefs, yesterday at Empower Field. I'm Ryan Kaufman, in case you're just tuning in for the first time. Welcome. You could stream the show live and watch the show live on our social media platforms at XTRA Sports 1300, Facebook, Instagram, X, YouTube. I told you to begin the show why the Denver Broncos are here, celebrating their first playoff berth in what feels like forever. Because they found the combination of head coach and quarterback that fit together, and it works. But I think the more interesting question, and maybe the more difficult question to answer, is why are they here so early? Perhaps these same conversations are going on in Washington as they are celebrating a playoff appearance. Now, the easy answer to that question is they took care of every lesser team on their schedule. The NFL does this every year. The way they schedule allows for a story like Washington, like Denver. And the Denver Broncos, including yesterday, got to their 10 wins by beating lesser teams. They don't have one win this year against a team better than them. But that even doesn't fully answer the question. Why did the Broncos rise to the top of that group? Because even though the NFL schedule allows for this to happen, because they let third-place teams play third-place teams and fourth-place teams play fourth-place teams, why did the Broncos rise to the top of this group with a rookie quarterback? I think the answer to that, and yesterday was a perfect example of this, Sean Payton rarely deviated from his plan with Bo Nix. You saw it yesterday. Did you see this unleashed Bo Nix that some people were calling for? Time to take the training wheels off, Sean. Let Bo Nix go. Let Bo cook. And now everyone's saying that he cooked yesterday. Did he make any plays that you haven't seen him make ever? I saw screen passes. Did you see screen passes? I saw a lot of screen passes. I saw quick reads. I saw a lot of yards after the catch. Tell me how yesterday was different than most any other game of Bo Nix's rookie season. And I'll tell you, it's not. The reason why he went 14 of 14 or 13 of 15 or whatever he finished off with. No, he had more passes than that, but he started 14 of 14 or whatever. It was because of the team he was going against. The level of competition that was on the other side of the football. The game plan was not different. Short pass, short pass, short pass. Now go long. Short pass, short pass, short. That's how run a little bit, Bo Nix. Yesterday, the game plan from the Denver Broncos looked similar to almost every Broncos game this year. And I mean that as a compliment to Sean Payton. I do. I was not one of these people who said, now it's time to let Bo Nix go. Let him run wild. You've lost back-to-back games. You now are in a win-or-go-home situation week 18. To deviate from anything that has gotten you to 9 wins to get your 10th would be insane. You're going to change it up and let Bo Nix sling it around the yard? He didn't sling it. Like people, it's so funny. Like the screen passes, and I didn't love the screen passes against Cincinnati either, but they work yesterday and they work for big plays. And then it's like, wow, the Bo Nix was cooking. He's doing the same thing he's done almost every game of this season. You know why? Because he is a rookie. Part of the reason why it worked and it worked so well is that Sean Payton struck the balance between development and winning. He actually accomplished both things this year. And it's not easy to do. But while everyone's screaming, you got to let Bo Nix take the training wheels off, unleash him, let him go, Sean Payton said no. And you look back at this season, 3 games, Bo Nix has attempted more than 40 passes. They're 1-2 in those games. Conversely, they're 4-0 when Bo Nix throws the ball less than 30 times. Bo Nix tossing the ball all around the yard with high frequency was not a winning formula in 2024 for the Denver Broncos. When they let Bo Nix sling it, and look, there were times where I thought Sean Payton deviated, and it was to the detriment of the Broncos. Bo Nix still has to work on his footwork. He still has to work on his decision-making. He still has to work on reading defenses. Like this idea that just because you've played X number of games that you're not a rookie, I'm sorry, you're a rookie until year 2. That's the way this works. Bo Nix has been a rookie this whole season and needed to have a controlled environment, if you will. To use the analogy, needed to have the training wheels on a little bit, needed to have the leash on, whatever analogy you want to use. He needed that through this season. To me, the more Bo Nix was allowed to cook, the worse things got for the Denver Broncos. When he stayed within Sean Payton's offense with the short throws, quick decisions, he was incredibly successful. When he was freestyling out there and teeing it up, it did not work. It didn't work. And look, for the record, you know, I've seen this debate on this argument. Really, it's not really a debate. It's an argument because it gets ugly, as all things do on social media. You know, people call him Bo Nix a yak king, right? You look at the passing chart and it's a bunch of green dots right by the line of scrimmage. And then he has like 2 throws deep, but yet he ends up with 250, 300 yards passing. And people are diminishing what Bo Nix is doing because he's getting a lot of yards after catch. Go look at Jaden Daniels' pass chart. When everybody was talking about how much of a genius Cliff Kingsbury was for the way he was handling Jaden Daniels and how amazing Jaden Daniels was as a rookie, go look at his passing chart. Go watch a Commanders game. You're going to see the same thing. You know who is allowed to kind of freestyle and air it out? Caleb Williams. How'd that go for him this year? The reason why the Denver Broncos are here now with a rookie quarterback is because Sean Payton treated him like a rookie quarterback, treated him like the most experienced rookie quarterback we have ever seen, which was part of the reason why Sean Payton felt so compelled to draft him when he did. But he looked at Bo Nix and he says, he can run a lot of my stuff and run enough of my stuff to be successful. So I think that, look, in a world where Kevin O'Connell doesn't exist, Sean Payton's probably the coach of the year. Dan Quinn would certainly have an argument, except for the fact that what is one of the big reasons why the Washington Commanders are where they are? It's Jaden Daniels. Who's most responsible for coaching Jaden Daniels? Cliff Kingsbury. So without Kevin O'Connell and what he did with Sam Darnold this year, Sean Payton would be the coach of the year. I think it's ridiculous to, there was a time when maybe you just say, okay, let Bo Nix go. But that time passed a long time ago when the Denver Broncos were up to 65, 70, 75%, 90% chance they were going to make the playoffs. That was no time to deviate and allow Bo Nix to air it out. That can be year two. But Sean Payton stuck to his plan with Bo Nix. And you look early on in the season until yesterday, and most of the games look alike. The throws that he's being asked to make, the decisions he's being asked to make, or the decisions more accurately he's not being asked to make. That's how the Broncos are here now. Now, ironically, the thing that would give them a shot against Buffalo is the very thing that Sean Payton has kept Bo Nix from being. Right? If you want to talk about taking the training wheels off of Bo Nix, airing it out, you actually have an argument for that this week. Because the way that the Broncos have won on the margins and all this kind of stuff, I don't think it's going to work in the playoffs. I think we have seen that you need to have exceptional quarterback play more often than not. When you have Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, and Patrick Mahomes on your side of the bracket, your quarterback has at times needed to match those guys throw for throw. And Bo Nix isn't capable of that. He's just not. It's not a knock on him. He's a rookie. He has time. But right now, the Bo Nix I saw through the season cannot match Josh Allen, cannot match Lamar Jackson. We already saw that. Cannot match playoff Patrick Mahomes. So that's the irony in all of this. What got the Denver Broncos to the playoffs is maybe the thing that more than anything else will keep them from winning on Sunday. As they don't have a quarterback that can make those big momentum swinging throws that you sometimes need in a playoff game. But I don't think that means that how Sean Payton handled Bo Nix was wrong. In fact, I think it was right. There were games where I was critical of Sean Payton. But for the most part, game 1 to game 17, he stayed pretty dang consistent in what he asked Bo Nix to do. And it's kind of hard to argue with the results, isn't it? 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on the Denver Broncos into the playoffs. They will take on the Buffalo Bills. What does Sean Payton think about that matchup? You'll hear from the Broncos coach next on Extra Sports 1300. Broncos beat the Chiefs yesterday by a lot. And now they are heading to Buffalo. It will be a Sunday game, in case you have not heard. It will be the early game on Sunday. And obviously, and the Broncos had a chance, right? The Broncos had a chance to get that spot that everybody was kind of hoping that they get, but didn't want to say it out loud because it would be disrespectful. Everyone wanted the Texans, right? Steelers, Chargers, Broncos all wanted Houston. Now, that's a little bit about Houston, but it's also about the relative strength of the three other teams. If you put the Chiefs, the Ravens, the Bills, and the Texans in a line and said which one of these things is less like the others, you would pick out Houston. Right? And CJ Stroud's got a bright future in this league. And I'm not, saying that Houston can't beat LA on Saturday. They could. But they don't look quite as formidable as they did a year ago. And compared to Baltimore, Kansas City, and Buffalo, they are certainly the desired matchup. So I don't know if for you as a Broncos fan, that if they would have been going to Baltimore, that you would feel infinitely better about their chances or worse about their chances. But Buffalo is the matchup. Buffalo has for a few weeks now been the only matchup they could have possibly gotten. And here's Sean Payton's first blush thoughts on Josh Allen and company.
Forward to the challenge. They've had a great season. We're familiar with certainly the travel. The last time we were there, it felt like we were there 7 days. We played them Monday night. We got out there Friday. Our plane was delayed. But, look, they're a real good football team. And that's why they're the 2 seed. And we're going to have a great week of preparation, and we'll get ready to go.
As cliche as it sounds, it is 1,000% correct. The Broncos will have to play, without question, their best game of the season on Sunday. And then some. And then some. It will require them taking their game to a level we have not even seen them against teams like Carolina and New Orleans. But you already know that. And there's plenty of time to really get in the weeds on this matchup. Obviously, there's an angle with Von Miller, who posted now I'm blanking on the movie, Wesley Snipes, Am I My Brother's Keeper? But there's going to be a big-time storyline with that. Von Miller going against the Denver Broncos. You know what it's going to take. And I would understand if you're skeptical that the Broncos are going to be able to deliver that on Sunday. But it will absolutely take them taking their game to a level we probably have not seen them have all year in order to win that game. Because the Buffalo Bills have something much bigger in mind. And here's the difference. Right? Because some people will play up the idea that the Bills are overlooking the Denver Broncos. I promise you, with what the Bills have been through and what this season means, they are not going to mess around with the Denver Broncos. I'll tell you this much. If the Denver Broncos win on Sunday, they will have 100% earned it. Because I don't think that the Buffalo Bills for a second are going to take the Broncos for granted. They know that they got to be at their best immediately because they are gearing up for what they think Well, not only do they have to do that in order to be ready for Baltimore, but you know the team that they expect to have to go through and what that team has meant to them over the last few years. It's not like the regular season. You're not catching teams like the Broncos against Tampa was a situation where the Broncos had a really good game plan, executed at a high level, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were feeling themselves. It was the confluence of those two things. That goes out the window, right? You're not going to catch anybody, especially a team that is tired of finishing runner-up in the AFC or getting bounced in the second round. They're not going to mess around with the Denver Broncos. If the Broncos beat them, they're going to beat them getting Buffalo's best. Because that team cannot afford to, play with their food in the first round and expect to be buttoned up and ready to go when they play Lamar Jackson the following week. And Patrick Mahomes the week after that. And yes, that's how I think this thing's going to play out. Now, I haven't decided whether I take Buffalo or Baltimore, but I'm saying that's the path for Buffalo. Because I absolutely do not see the Pittsburgh Steelers beating the Baltimore Ravens. I will be shocked. And I don't know if Sean Payton meant this yesterday, but when you hear him talk about Bo Nix, and this is a little bit longer of a clip, but when you hear the part I'm referring to, you'll know. Maybe one just final dig at his former quarterback. Take a listen. Here's Sean Payton talking about Bo Nix's progression from the beginning of the year till now.
Here's the one thing I know. He's a hard sack, right? And I also know it's difficult if someone coming from the college ranks is sacked quite a bit. It's difficult to change that. And so that statistic has as much to do with the quarterback as it does the offensive line. And I think that he processes it and gets rid of it. And the other thing I would say is, man, with his feet, maybe there's a little bit more there than I didn't or we didn't see because, he didn't run the shuttles and everything, but he can run. That's kind of the spaghetti sauce sometimes when the pocket isn't clean.
The spaghetti sauce. We have a new Sean Payton analogy. But you heard it in there, right? Sack is a quarterback stat. He didn't mean it to take a shot at Russell Wilson. He did not. But you can't not hear that and wonder if it is. It's just Sean Payton speaking the truth of the matter. What he believes. And it just so happens that the guy that he inherited in Denver is a repeat offender, shall we say, in that area. And certainly a playoff berth for the first time in 9 seasons should be enough. And I know the Pittsburgh Steelers got in too, but you look at how the Steelers have ended this season, maybe a little bit more satisfaction, a little bit more excitement. And just also, should I take my victory lap now about Russell Wilson or do I do that later? Took a little while. It's hanging on for dear life there. But yeah, who would have thunk that if Sean Payton couldn't coach that out of Russell Wilson, that Mike Tomlin was going to be able to? But it's just the fact of the matter when it comes to Bo Nix. It's true about Bo Nix, and the opposite is true about Russell Wilson. It's not Sean Payton trying to take a dig at Russell Wilson, but that's him once again reiterating the reason why he went to the front office and said, I don't care what the dead cap number is, make it work. I can't win with this guy. And also it's why he looked in the draft process and said, I can win with that guy. And a season goes by and you look, Sean Payton was right. Bo Nix has done a very good job this season not taking sacks, and Russell Wilson has done a very poor job in the most crucial times for the Pittsburgh Steelers to avoid sacks. It's why he wanted to move on. And the Broncos are better off because of it. And that's part of this too. That the Denver Broncos took on the biggest dead cap hit in NFL history, and they're a playoff team. Whether 7 teams is your cup of tea, it's not mine. I could go with 6, but there's 7. That means all 7 are considered playoff teams. The Broncos are a playoff team. Seven 719-247-1313. Earlier, I mentioned that a member of the Broncos staff is going to be interviewed for one of these open head coaching vacancies. Open vacancy. That's a little redundant. One of these head coaching vacancies, I think you could guess who. So we'll ask the question, which job would you rather have? Defensive coordinator of the Denver Broncos or head coach of the Jets? So Broncos on the other side of what today is in the NFL. For 14 teams, it's about celebrating a berth in the playoffs. For another, what are we at? 5 teams. It's about finding a new head coach, and then everyone else is just kind of in the middle. Probably wanting to fire their head coach, like the New York Giants, but they're keeping Brian Daboll. Vance Joseph's name has already come up for one of these openings, and it's the Jets. So if you're keeping track at home, New England is now open. Jacksonville is open. Doug Peterson got fired today. At least Khan waited till this morning to do it and not while he was on his way to the car, like Gerard Mayo got the news from Robert Kraft. Bears, you already knew was open because they fired Eberflus. Jets, the same thing. Dallas is a kind of, because Mike McCarthy's deal is set to expire, I believe, next week. And then you have the Saints, who fired Dennis Allen a while ago. And I said this after the Broncos played the Saints. If Vance Joseph, because at the time he was the toast of the town, the Broncos defense was the toast of the town. I said, if Vance Joseph takes another head coaching job, you watch Dennis Allen become the defensive coordinator of the Denver Broncos. Not exactly my hottest take of all time, but maybe we're heading in that direction. So Vance Joseph is reportedly going to interview for the Jets job. Vance Joseph has got one more shot at this. If he does get a head coaching job, and I don't know if he will or not, but if he gets a head coaching job, it will be his last. Unless he does so well there, and then, I don't know, eventually, you know, there's a middle ground here, but let's say that Vance Joseph goes somewhere and it doesn't work within a few years. It will be his last head coaching job. Do you want to take that chance with Woody Johnson in the New York Jets? And to that, I say absolutely not. Of these jobs that are open, and they all have their flaws, an owner comes up on most of them. I think Gail Benson is still in good standing. Is she still well liked down in New Orleans? I think everyone else has about had it with the owner. Dallas, Chicago, New England, Jacksonville. If I am Vance Joseph, or I am advising Vance Joseph, and he tells me, he says, Ryan, I want to take one of these jobs. I want to go now and become a head coach. I will tell him, just please don't make it the Jets job. As a friend, as a mentor, if I may, don't take the Jets job. That is the worst job of all the jobs that are now open. The worst. Worse than the Cowboys, worse than the Patriots, worse than the Jags, worse than the Bears. The Jets is the worst job. But I think this coaching carousel will be interesting to see. I think there's, and you can thank Ben Johnson for this. I think there's this kind of collective realization from coordinators that maybe it would be better to be a coordinator in a good spot than a head coach in a bad spot? Ben Johnson not jumping at the opportunity to be a head coach after the Lions' success last year. By the way, he looks like a genius because they were even better this year. But I think it was largely because Ben Johnson didn't want to go the way of Brandon Staley, Nathaniel Hackett, these other first-time head coaches that jump at the first opportunity they get. Maybe they're not prepared for it. Maybe they're just thrust into a terrible situation. They get fired, and then they have to wait forever. Like, think about for Vance Joseph, if he gets a job this cycle, it's been a while since he was the Broncos head coach. So I wonder if we see that this cycle. Because just on the whole, I would say that this cycle, the jobs that are open are worse. Just on the whole than the ones that were open last year. He should not take the Jets job. Nobody should take it. Like Aaron Rodgers should just coach the Jets. They should go without a coach for a year. Because I would not advise any assistant or past head coach to take the Jets job. That's the worst one. Now, got a text in at 719-247-1313 that says that the Bears, I said Browns. Browns are keeping Stefanski. The Bears, I almost did again. The Bears are also going to interview Vance Joseph. I can't quit them. I can't quit the Bears. I can't quit Caleb Williams. I'm not abandoning ship after one season. I will tell you this offseason, like I told you last offseason, the Bears is the best job. It is. It has so many things that if you are capable as a head coach, you can get it to work. I promise. That roster has talent. Are they a finished product? Absolutely not. They got to address the offensive line, as many NFL teams do. Caleb Williams needs to be brought back from the brink a little bit. You saw him on the sideline. It was a very trying year for Caleb Williams. But there's more right in Chicago than these other places. And I'll still say Chicago's the best job. Now, is it the best job for Vance Joseph? Is what Caleb Williams needs another defensive-minded head coach? Or given that he is a young quarterback, and given that he had such a tough year last year, or this season, I should say, and maybe confidence is wavering a little bit, is the best thing to bring in a defensive-minded head coach? I would say no. I would understand why Vance Joseph would look at it, or any other candidate would look at it and say, that's probably the best job of them all. But do the Bears need to go down that road? I think you let Ben Johnson do what he wants. And I like Ryan Poles, and I think he did some good in Chicago. But if Ben Johnson wants a different GM, I let him pick his GM. I let him do it. Because Ben Johnson, what he has done with Jared Goff is exactly what Caleb Williams needs. And then, of course, Cliff Kingsbury is going to be brought up, but then you have to ask him what he's learned from his last stint, where his Cardinals teams imploded in the back half of the schedule. How is he going to be a better head coach? Is Cliff Kingsbury just a coordinator? And there's that worry with Ben Johnson a little bit too, right? Maybe he is best suited to be a coordinator. But I'm looking to the offensive side of the ball. Chicago is the best job. It's between New England and Jacksonville. Yeah. I mean, what are we talking about here? We're talking about a bunch of bad football teams, all of them with pretty much bad owners. Saints don't even have a quarterback that you can win a lot with. I don't know. Maybe Derek Carr's healthy. Maybe you could talk yourself into getting some wins there. I'll go Chicago 1. The cons are a little bit of a circus, but I'm not, keeping up with the theme of I'm not quitting Caleb Williams. I won't quit Trevor Lawrence. It's very clear that he's not what I thought he was going to be coming out of college, but I still see enough to say that you can win football games. You could be a playoff team with Trevor Lawrence as your quarterback. I think New England has hurt itself so much because before, when they hired Gerard Mayo, we didn't know they would have Drake May, but we figured they could get a quarterback, right? One of these guys. So young quarterback, you would not have much talent in year one, but you'd have a lot of cap space moving forward. Now it's like Robert Kraft has become such a wild card. I don't know if you want to walk into that job. But hey, what's the old saying? Only 32 of these gigs. These teams will find a candidate for all of them. But getting back to the original thesis here, if I'm Vance Joseph, maybe I put up with Jerry Jones if I get Dak and CD and maybe Dallas. But I would want Chicago. I just don't know that Chicago should want Vance Joseph. I don't know. I may take a year. I mean, you look at the Broncos defense. Like, there's reason to believe that they can be better, right? I mean, look how young they are. And then everyone wants, and I get it, everyone wants the Denver Broncos to use their first round pick on a weapon for Bo Nix, but could be pass rusher. I don't know. I don't know if there is. I mean, the Charger job last year was such a unique thing. I mean, even the Denver job wasn't an amazing job. Sean Payton took a little bit of a chance. I don't know. I'm looking at these between the teams that might actually be interested in Vance Joseph, and there's a difference between interviewing a guy and really being interested in him. You hope that your team casts a wide net. Don't do the Patriot thing and promote from within without at least seeing what other people outside the organization have to offer. I think maybe sticking with the Broncos for another year might be the best course of action for Vance Joseph. But we'll see if he advances, if he becomes a finalist for any of these jobs. Right now, it's about casting a very wide net. And I saw David Shaw's name brought up again. And, I was vehemently against the idea of him coaching the Denver Broncos a couple years ago. So a lot of names are going to be thrown out there, some off the wall ideas. We'll see how this thing progresses. But if I'm Vance Joseph after the season I just had, I'd look to Ben Johnson like, maybe I'll try one more year. Go one more year, then see if I can see how much more winning I can do, up my value. Because with these younger candidates, even though it could be detrimental to their future as a head coach if they take the wrong job, there's the thought that they can get. I mean, if Josh McDaniels can get hired again after he flamed out in Denver, then anybody can get a second opportunity to be a head coach in the NFL. Well, except Urban Meyer. So I stand corrected. But Vance Joseph, if he doesn't make the next stop that he goes to work, he's never going to get the chance to be a head coach again. And I don't know that he'd want to take that chance on the jobs that are open. And the jobs that are open that I think would seriously consider Vance Joseph, which would be a few of them. (719) 247-1313. Take your thoughts on Black Monday. Broncos not celebrating Black Monday this year, or observing would probably be the better way to put it. Celebrating Black Monday. Black Friday or Black Monday. We don't celebrate either. We just observe them. But coming up next, back to the Broncos win yesterday, putting them in the playoffs. Buffalo coming up on Sunday. Hello there. Welcome in Drive Time Sports on this Monday. Ryan Kaufman with you. Pleasure to have you, whether you're listening on your radio, online at extrasports1300.com, or you've downloaded the new Extra Sports 1300 app. And did I mention it was 100% free? Well, I just did. And it's sponsored by Diversus Health. Mental health and well-being for all. You know the drill. If you don't, because you're new here, welcome. You could text or phone in your thoughts on this Monday at 719-247-1313. Normally, we have 3 stories that are driving the show, but let's be honest, there's one, and then there's like some spin-offs. So here we go, the 3 stories that are driving the show. All right, you know what it is. Here we go.
Nix with a play fake. Now rolls to his right. Bo looks in the end zone, throws a ball behind the intended receiver, bounced up into the air, bounced again, and then caught by Devon Vele. Touchdown, Denver.
KOA on the call. I don't know that you needed that touchdown in particular to let you know that it was going to be the Broncos' day. Plenty happened before that, but that encapsulated what yesterday was. And as I said to start the show, it was not so much a football game as it was a party, a celebration of the Denver Broncos ending their playoff drought and successfully rebooting their once proud franchise. I said last week, watch out if the Broncos start slow or the Chiefs start fast. Well, the Broncos started fast and the Chiefs did not. And the Chiefs never got out of first gear. I don't think they were even in gear. They were just, just grinding. They weren't even in first gear at any point in that game. And the Broncos came out like Sean Payton said they would, focused on themselves and treating it as if they were playing the real Kansas City Chiefs. And once you saw, I think you needed to see one offensive drive for the Broncos, one for the Chiefs, and you're like, yeah, this is going to be it. So Broncos could have clinched earlier, but they do indeed get it done, and they are going to the playoffs for the first time since 2015. And I think the question is not so much why they're here. Well, let me answer that. The reason why they're here is because for the first time since the Super Bowl, they have a head coach and a quarterback that are not only both capable of doing the job, but they fit. And that's what you need in the NFL. You need to have a coach/play caller, right? Could the Commanders have success with a different head coach than Dan Quinn? I don't know. Maybe if they still have Cliff Kingsbury. Coach, play caller, however you want to refer to him, and a quarterback. That's what you have to have first and foremost. And the Broncos, for all of these years, never did. They had coaches that were not up for the job, right? Guys that were in over their skis. You had coaches who did not like the quarterback that they were asked to throw out there, Vic Fangio and Drew Lock. For the first time since Coobs and Peyton, the Broncos have a fit with the head coach/play caller and their quarterback. And they had to pay a steep price, right? In the world of you get what you pay for. The Broncos pay Sean Payton more than anybody pays their head coach except the Kansas City Chiefs. That was just to get him in the door. That was just to get him to agree to the job. They had to make him the highest paid coach at the time outside of Bill Belichick and Andy Reid. Now only Andy Reid makes more than he does. They had to use a higher draft pick than Bo Nix was worth at the time, or Bo Nix would be in the pecking order. Right? They overdrafted Bo Nix. And I'll tell you, Brock Bowers is a better football player than Bo Nix. Right? So there's one guy right there. But the Broncos used a higher draft pick because they knew that was the guy for them, that it would work, that it would fit. And, oh, by the way, to be able to facilitate all of this, they had to take on the most dead cap money in the history of the NFL by cutting Russell Wilson loose. So they paid Russ to go away, they paid Sean Payton, and they paid a high draft pick to get Bo Nix. But isn't all of it worth it now? When you get a head coach and a quarterback that not only can both do the job, but fit together so well, that's what works in the NFL. That's what you have to have before you discuss anything else. If you don't have that, you're not going anywhere. Now, that's why they're here. Why are they here so quickly? Why are they here in Bo Nix's rookie year? Because even with the pleadings of fans and media alike, Sean Payton didn't really let Bo Nix cook, didn't let Bo Nix off the leash, didn't take the training wheels off. Even yesterday, against a JV defense, Sean Payton called the same stuff for Bo Nix that he has called all season long. A lot of short passes, a lot of quick decisions, a lot of yards after the catch. But it's worked. It's worked most of this year. It's worked at least 10 times. And I would even throw in 11 off the top of my head because it worked pretty damn well against the Kansas City Chiefs the first time. Sean Payton never, I don't want to say never, there were times, rarely deviated from what his plan was for Bo Nix in year one. But because he believed that what he was going to ask Bo Nix to do would be enough for the Denver Broncos to be in most of the games that they play, or most, just depends, what part of the country you're from. Most of the games they would be in, and they would have a chance to win, and that's where Sean Payton instilling discipline in his team, winning the turnover margin, all this winning in the margins that Sean Payton was going to do. He felt like he could do that, asking Bo Nix to do what he has asked him to do all season. It's hard to argue with the results, but I think the process was right. There will be plenty of time to ask Bo Nix to win you a football game, to match Josh Allen throw for throw, because that's the irony in all of this. Is that the thing they've been asking Bo Nix to be for most of the season probably will not lead them to victory over Buffalo. But there's the micro and there's the macro. There's the tiny picture and there's the bigger picture. Sean Payton was trying to think about both. Keeping Bo Nix within his offense, not asking him to do too much. Don't get sacked. Don't turn it over. Quick decisions, quick throws. It got the Denver Broncos to the playoffs in his second year, when they were expected by Vegas to win less than 6 games. Sean Payton handled Bo Nix right. And that's kind of secondary because obviously everything is about the playoffs and can they compete with Buffalo and all this kind of stuff. Even if they don't make the playoffs, like 3-4 weeks ago, let's say, Sean Payton had obviously handled Bo Nix exactly the way he should have to that point. Now, once the Broncos beat the Colts, then it was like, well, it's all playoffs now. Right? So he had to stick with it, but he stuck with it, and I think Bo Nix is in a good place moving forward because of it. The next step is going to be that Bo Nix is going to have to make better decisions on downfield throws and is going to have to win the Broncos games against elite teams because they did not beat one elite team in the NFL this year. But think about that Sean Payton was able to take a rookie quarterback, develop him the right way, and still make the postseason. There is no conference by conference coach of the year. Sean Payton was the coach of the year in the AFC for what it's worth. You get nothing for that. But he did a great job of balancing the two. But again, in order for the Broncos to beat Buffalo, to beat Kansas City, to beat Baltimore, they have to have a quarterback capable of making big-time plays and maybe over and over again. Bo Nix is not there. The Broncos will approach this game with Buffalo the way they have approached every game because it's worked and it's kept them in games. And there's, with a week's notice to be able to completely change who you are, it's not a good idea. It might even go worse. So they'll stick with the same game plan, hope to keep it close. And who knows, maybe Sean McDermott will send 12 players out on the field for a field goal. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on the Denver Broncos clinching their first playoff spot in many a year. They will play the Buffalo Bills at 11 a.m. on Sunday. More Drive Time Sports coming up next. Coming up tonight, don't forget, there are other teams in the state of Colorado. Most notably, the Colorado Avalanche, who are in action tonight against the reigning defending Florida Panthers. 7 o'clock puck drop at Ball Arena. We got right here for you on Extra Sports 1300. And I do want to talk about the Nuggets as well, because what we saw over the weekend was what people tried to make Nikola Jokic versus Joel Embiid. And I understand. And hey, I took part in it too. Hyped up the matchups, said the two best big men in the league, all this kind of stuff. Well, that's gone by the wayside. That is now Victor Wembanyama versus Nikola Jokic. And the show that those two put on in 2 games in a home and home over the weekend was everything that we hoped that Joel Embiid versus Nikola Jokic would be and rarely ever got. And you could just tell listening to Nikola Jokic talk that he has the utmost respect for Victor Wembanyama. And he understands that there will come a day, as crazy as it is to sound, that Victor Wembanyama will overtake Nikola Jokic as the league's best big man. And you know what? Nikola Jokic is going to help him do it. He's going to help him do it. Because while Victor Wembanyama may one day soon, or maybe not soon, maybe sometime 5-6 years from now, he's not right now. And Nikola Jokic got the better of Victor Wembanyama. Statistically, in both games, the two teams split their home and home. But Nikola Jokic taught Victor Wembanyama a thing or two. And just the dynamic between those two, watching them on the court, listening to them both speak, it's what you hope. And I'm too young to have lived through the Bird and Magic years. And I know that the Bird and Magic thing had some more layers to it, some animosity. There's no animosity between Nikola Jokic and Victor Wembanyama. But this is what it's supposed to be. 2 elite players at their position, going toe-to-toe, shot for shot, block for block, assist for assist, steal for steal, and putting on a show. And the older, the more veteran of the 2 players trying to, and this is a wrestling term, put the younger player over the top. That's what Nikola Jokic is trying to do. We talk about athletes trying to leave the league in a better spot than they found it, right? A lot of athletes, when they retire, say, I hope I left the league in a better place than I found it. Nikola Jokic is doing it with Victor Wembanyama because he is going at him with everything he's got, which one shows the respect level he has, that he doesn't think he can, mess around with Victor like he can so many of the league's big men. But it's also, it seems like he legitimately wants to make Victor Wembanyama better. And maybe there's some selfish part of Nikola Jokic that is doing this. Like maybe he's building up Victor Wembanyama so he has an adversary. So he has a peer. So he has somebody to get him excited about a particular game on the schedule. He's to the point that he makes it look easy every single night. And he is a complete mismatch. None of these teams, and I try to listen to as much as the of the opposing radio broadcasts as I can, or some of the opposing talk as well as I can, because I just want to see what they have to say. And I was listening to the Jazz broadcast the other night, and the conversation was nobody knows how to stop him. So it's easy for me to say that, and outside listeners will be like, oh, you're just being a homer and you're hyping up your guy. I'm telling you, every NBA city that Nikola Jokic visits, every NBA team that Nikola Jokic plays, their broadcasters, the people that know, that have no bias towards Nikola Jokic whatsoever, but know their teams and know what their coaches are saying no one knows how to stop this guy. The days of, hey, just let him get his points. Well, what if he scores 55? Again, it's not the ideal version of the Denver Nuggets, but he's done it and they've won. Oh, you got to move him out of the paint. Like, ideally, but now he's leading the league in three-point shooting. It's being in Nikola Jokic's shoes, and I know he's not this arrogant, but there got to be times where he's just like, this is easy. Now, trust me, it's balanced out by the fact that he has to carry the Denver Nuggets on most nights. Like, that makes his job harder. But just in terms of what he has to do on a nightly basis against the guy guarding him, it's easy. And here he recognizes in Victor Wembanyama a guy that in the very near future can legitimately challenge him. And I think there, again, is that desire for Nikola Jokic to build up Victor Wembanyama. Now, there's no reason to think that Wembanyama can't get to superstardom by him without Nikola Jokic. Sure, he could. But it's a more sure path when you have a peer or a rival that's pushing you. And Victor Wembanyama said that Nikola Jokic is 100% what he wants to be. There's the respect there, but also the tenacity from both of them that they recognize how difficult the other one is, and they want to be at their best, especially with Wembanyama having to defend Jokic. Right? Nuggets put Peyton Watson on Victor Wembanyama. But it was, if you divorce yourself from the result, because the first game against San Antonio, what a disaster that was. Michael Malone not using the timeout and everything like that. But just watching the two of them, it's what for years people tried to make Joel Embiid versus Nikola Jokic. And we got one matchup, and then we turned around and saw him again. And it was just as good the second time. That's going to be the matchup to watch. And I legitimately hope that the San Antonio Spurs do right by Victor Wembanyama and get him some help. Because that team is pretty devoid of talent. I could see, remember when Carmelo's Nuggets would run into San Antonio? Could see that happening, but the shoe being on the other foot, right? San Antonio being the ascending team and the Nuggets being, now they got to win another title, But just the idea that the Nuggets are the more established team, Spurs are on the come up, and seeing them run into each other a few times in the playoffs. That'd be give me 7 games of Victor versus Jokic. And literally just Victor Wembanyama versus Nikola Jokic. I don't need anybody else on the court. Just one-on-one for 7 games. Let's decide this thing. It was awesome. So that was happening while we were counting down to yesterday afternoon's game between the Broncos and the Chiefs. And then tonight, Avs back at it. Having to bounce back after a loss to Montreal, of all teams. But they're allowed. Nuggets are at the point they're not allowed one. They got to start winning. And they have Boston tomorrow night. And I was talking to somebody about this matchup. I'm like, Nikola Jokic might have 50. The Boston Celtics might still beat the Denver Nuggets by 50. Haven't seen enough yet from the Nuggets to believe they have completely turned things around and are ready to take on a team like Boston. But we'll see. In the meantime, Avs Panthers coming up at 7 o'clock. Take a break, come back, couple of texts. Tom wants to defend his boy Robert Kraft, or at least the owner of his team. I don't want to say that you're boys with Robert Kraft. You may not know the gentleman. But my assertion that Robert Kraft is quickly morphing into Jerry Jones without Bill Belichick and Tom Brady to keep him honest. That's next here on Extra Sports 1300. I'll have more on the Broncos win over the Chiefs in their playoff berth when I join Jessica Mendoza on KKTV 11 tonight at 10, if you are so inclined. Love for you to tune in. Jessica will be on this show, I hope this week. I mean, people got to talk to people and everything, but hope to have Jessica on as we count you down to the playoff game between the Broncos and the Bills, which will again occur on Sunday. A couple of other things I want to get to on this Monday. First, Tom is in. I am really down on Robert Kraft. I think you strip away Tom Brady and you strip away Bill Belichick, and Robert Kraft looks much like most of these owners. They make rash decisions. They make poor decisions. And left unchecked, they will hurt your franchise or set your franchise back. Now, the good news is they have Drake May. So they did do that right. But who's going to coach Drake May? And if you were going to take a quarterback anyway, why would you make Gerard Mayo your coach? Tom says Kraft is not a wild card. He had to deal with Mayo to hire him after Hoodie left. And I think he had to deal with Vrabel to not take a job last year, and he would have him this year. Why? But why? We all said that Vrabel should be the hire in New England last year. Why wait a year? Somebody has to, you got to explain to me. I don't expect you to know, Tom, but somebody's got to explain to me what was keeping Robert Kraft from hiring Mike Vrabel last year. And two, you're going to. So you're going to make Gerard Mayo a stopgap. What if he succeeded? Or what if he had a better season than this? Then you just abandon your master plan to hire Mike Vrabel? What if he wins 6 games? What if he wins 7? Like, even Robert Kraft today admitted fault. I put him in a situation that he wasn't ready for, which is a little bit of a cop-out. It's more of a criticism of Gerard Mayo, but it's Robert Kraft's way, and you have to understand these old billionaires, like, it's very difficult for them to own up to anything. It makes no sense. It made little sense on why you promoted Gerard Mayo. They didn't even do a search. They're just like, he's our guy. So that was mistake number one. And then you fire him after a year. And then are we 100% sure Mike Vrabel's taking the job? I mean, I know it would be perfect. It'd be amazing and just make the Patriots look even weirder that they just didn't do this in the first place. But are we sure Mike Vrabel wants to take the Patriot job? If I'm Mike Vrabel, my affinity for that franchise has got to be put aside to a certain extent. And I'm if all this, what you say, Tom, is close to true, if I'm Mike Vrabel, I say my price just went up. I squeeze Robert Kraft for every penny he's got to pick a next head coach, to pay a next head coach. just it happened with Jerry Reinsdorf. It's happened with a lot of owners. They got it right at one point, and then they started to believe that they were, more of, and I think even this happens to GMs with Jerry Krause. I think this happened a little bit, although he deserves a lot of credit for those Bulls dynasties. Ultimately, I think he maybe looked at himself as a little bit more important. And that's what happens when you have so much success and everybody's doting on you, or maybe not enough people. And then we saw that with the documentary with the New England Patriots. Right? It was put in place to make Robert Kraft look like this visionary genius that was responsible for everything good that has happened to the New England Patriots. And does he deserve some credit? Yeah, of course he does. But is he the main reason? No. Is he the second reason? No. Is he the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth reason? No. He's not. But ego comes in. When you have as much money as these people, you expect to be fawned over. You expect everyone to kiss the ring. And there were a lot of people over the years that did not do that with Robert Kraft and talked about Belichick and Brady. And now you're seeing Robert Kraft without Belichick and Brady is what? Firing a head coach after one season. Gerard Mayo was so bad that he deserved the same fate as Urban Meyer or Nathaniel Hackett or Mike Mularkey. This guy that you had under your roof for all these years that you supposedly knew better than anybody else. And after 1 year, you're like, he's not the guy. Well, that reflects poorly on Robert Kraft for thinking that he was. Yeah, maybe Vrabel gets that job. Maybe this is all Robert Kraft's master plan. But today he looks like a buffoon. I'm just telling you. Today he does. Also, the draft order is set. More importantly, that's the most important thing. Who cares about the playoffs? Draft order. Tennessee is now officially on the clock. I would say Shador or Cam Ward. I don't think that they're going to. Another team maybe I could see pulling a Carolina Panthers, or I'm sorry, Chicago Bears. There are a lot of teams that I think could pull a Carolina Panthers. Pulling a Chicago Bears and being willing to give up the number one pick, I don't see the Titans doing that. They have made some significant investments in their team. It's go time. So if they like Cam Ward, if they like Shador, they're going to draft that guy. Cleveland is where it's interesting. Because I said, I would love to see Travis Hunter in a Browns jersey. The ultimate football player, right? Plays both sides of the ball, go into an old school organization. They don't even have a logo on their helmet. Browns. I love the idea of Travis Hunter on the Browns. But if you're not going to go quarterback, and you're going to lose out on Travis Hunter, right? If you're the Browns and you trade down, let's say with the Raiders, say Cam Ward goes 1, Browns trade down with the Raiders, so the Raiders get Shador. The Giants are drafting Travis Hunter. But what if you're Cleveland could you get from the Raiders that makes it okay? That will be a question asked. And are the Browns, they got Deshaun Watson for another season. They restructured his deal. Obviously, a restructuring usually means they make it easier for them to cut, but they're not cutting him this offseason. Are they emboldened by the Atlanta Falcons and say, hey, we already know that our quarterback stinks? Atlanta drafted Michael Penix when they thought their quarterback was good. We know our quarterback stinks. We're definitely drafting a quarterback to sit behind him. Entirely possible. But I think Mark Davis is willing to meet the asking price. I mean, can you imagine what Brock Bowers would do with a capable quarterback? Like, seriously, just think about it. Brock Bowers was the best non-quarterback rookie in the NFL. And in fact, you can make a decent argument he was the rookie of the year. You could. And he had that quarterback situation. If you're Mark Davis, has got to be looking at it and saying, my goodness, I put Shador with Brock Bowers. Be well on my way. But would the Browns be willing to move out of that pick? Browns already the most fascinating team. As usually most teams at number 2 in the draft become. Right? Because in many ways, although I don't think it will be the case this year, I think there's an open debate. Cam Ward or Shador, or I don't think the Titans will, but there will be a stretch, a few days, a couple weeks where people will report and theorize that the Titans may go with Travis Hunter at number 1. But there's a little bit of uncertainty, certainly more than last year, when it comes to the number 1 overall pick. But I still think the Browns are the most fascinating. Do you draft your quarterback to replace Deshaun Watson? Or do you get the best player pound for pound in this draft in Travis Hunter? Or do you trade down? I think the Browns with capable quarterbacking are a solid team. They're not elite. There's a little bit of fool's gold with that Joe Flacco season. A little bit. And then you have the Giants after that. And of course, the Giants could move up as well. I think certainly that would be the case, but Raiders would have to offer more. Then New England at 4, Jacksonville at 5. You know, everybody talking about the Giants, you know, screwing themselves out of their pick. And I get it. They're down the list. How about Jacksonville? I know they don't necessarily need a quarterback, but the drop off to go from Travis Hunter to Will Johnson, which is one mock draft that I'm looking at, and Will Johnson's a good player. But Jacksonville, you want to talk about a team fumbling it. How about Jacksonville? I still think there's a decent chance the Giants come away with their quarterback. But the Jags, to be able to put Travis Hunter with Trevor Lawrence and have him play defense as well, they messed up. And then you have the Raiders, Jets. Man, scrolling. Broncos at 21. And how about this? The mock draft I'm looking at, Tyler Warren, tight end, Penn State. Telling you, I don't think he lasts that long, but if he was there for the Broncos to grab at 21, my goodness. And then Scattaboo coming back with your second round pick. Come on. It's already been the year of the Broncos. Keep it going. 2025 year of the Broncos getting Tyler Warren and Scattaboo in the draft. So, Titans, you are on the clock. Shedeur. Not Shedeur no matter what. Do your due diligence. But I think Shedeur's better than Cam Ward. And, by the way, not for nothing, more ready to contribute immediately than Cam Ward. You could argue the ceiling is a little bit higher for Cam Ward. Maybe. If you want the guy that, if the tiebreaker for you is who has a better chance of stepping on the field earlier and helping us win, it's Shedeur. But that'll be the, and then of course we have the wild card of Deion Sanders. Does he want Shedeur to play in Tennessee? But all that is for down the road. See how nice it is that you don't really have to dive into the draft yet because there's meaningful football games coming up if you're a Broncos fan that you care about. And that will dominate the conversation all week. Don't worry, we'll mix in some Avs and the Nuggets. But, yeah, all week talking about the Broncos and the Bills, getting you ready for that matchup on Sunday. And, of course, you're home, not for the Broncos because of contractual whatever. Root for them to go to the AFC Championship, and then we can have a conversation. But Ravens, Steelers on Saturday. The second two games of the triple header on Sunday, and then, of course, the Monday game between the Rams and the Vikings can all be heard right here on Extra Sports 1300. That'll do it for today's show. I appreciate your patronage very much. Uncharted territory. I believe I joined this radio station in a much smaller capacity when Peyton Manning was leading the Broncos to a Super Bowl, and it took all this time, but now we can have a discussion about the Broncos in the postseason. I look forward to doing that with you tomorrow and throughout the week here on Extra Sports 1300.
I'm Dan Patrick, and this is Above the Noise. At 15-2, the Lions have